same question to the Gold Cup, another summer tournament that was a little bit, you wouldn't say it's peak 100%. If this is a confederations, a whole region of the world's championship, and not every country, even plays their A team. And there was a lot of hullabaloo about the selection and the availability of the American players. I have my thoughts on how it can be changed and legitimized and make it to the point where the star players have, an in or an out sort of a selection moment. But before I delve into those, what are your thoughts generally on the Gold Cup? Because not a lot of people, it's not front of mind.
No, certainly not. Full transparency, only game I watched was the final. And yeah, a lot of that is due to just the selection and the squad, the players that were not only competing for the US, but we saw the same thing with Mexico and a number of these other teams where, again, these guys need time off, and you can't blame the players for saying, hey, I need to rest. I need to recuperate. I've got a full club schedule that's coming in just a couple of months, and I need to be ready for, those games where I'm getting paid. Again, it's an honor to be able to represent your country, and, you would like to see those best players in those big games, but without incentives, it kind of just falls by the wayside. It's not a top priority. Even the Gold Cup, it's not the World Cup, right? Everybody's going to show up for the World Cup, but Gold Cup still kind of a backseat sort of thing. And until you make it into that true top level competition, I think you're going to see a lot of guys choose to just not participate because, again, there's only so many days in the calendar, and with the mounting number of games, they've got to pick and choose their spots.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that the whole region like a whole confederations championship would be an optional tournament at all. Bernardo, not necessarily the point I'm making, but Nations League making Gold Cup redundant. And yes, definitely in this year, as it seemed like Nations League was the prioritized as the 1A team competition of the season, and Pulisic and those being selected for that and not being available in the summer. So my thoughts to try to legitimize the Gold Cup, because you said you barely watched it. It didn't even come onto my radar until 2011 when I lived in Chicago and there was games hosted there, to be honest, in my moment of transparency regarding the Gold Cup. But so I want to hear in the comments and from you, Mitch. So would this make it an A1, no optional sort of level for this if we made the Gold Cup every 4 years? So right now it's every 2 years, which also waters down the competition because it is more regular than it really needs to be, adding more games and kind of watering down the importance of it because it seems like, oh, is it a Gold Cup year? And kind of even people in the know kind of scratch their head. Is it, or is it not currently a Gold Cup year? Make it every 4 years. So I feel the scarcity makes it more important to players and fans alike. I would imagine it's something to kind of like build up for, not an obligation, which it kind of seems like now, or at the most part right now, it's kind of like testing the depth. One of my points was everyone was riding high when the USA won the Gold Cup a couple iterations ago, and then they failed to qualify for the World Cup just a few months ago. And after that, and nobody remembered when the Gold Cup, just because the World Cup on non-qualification greatly overshadowed that. So I'd go every 4 years for the Gold Cup and then rotating hosts. So as of now, it is just the United States hosting this competition. So it doesn't necessarily seem like the entire confederation is truly 100% involved and committed and has a skin in the game to a greater degree. I'm sure there's we all know the reasons why it's held here. I'm sure the commercial and profit incentives here are greater than other countries. But if like say Mexico and then Costa Rica and then some of the other confederations, maybe some of the smaller countries like grouped together to host, but you feel like it would be make it more interesting, because I definitely enjoy when the men's national team has to go down to different confederation nations in World Cup qualifying. To see that within the Gold Cup, I think would make it more exciting.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think it's never going to get better until you try it, right? You say there's plenty of commercial reasons why it's always in the United States, and that's totally understandable. But I don't know how you plan to build those other countries up to the point where they can present that same commercial opportunity if you never give them the opportunity to do so. I think traveling it around would certainly help. Making it every 4 years would certainly help because, yeah, it gets lost in the shuffle. There's just too many tournaments. And then you get into situation where fans are left wondering, what is this almost? How many
Yeah.
tournaments do we need? How many champions can there possibly be? What is the value? You look at some of the top players choosing to bow out. I think that's largely in part because it is every 2 years and they know, hey, a couple more years, I'll get another shot and I can play in that one. Whereas World Cup being every 4 years, you don't know how many of those you're going to get, right? In a playing career, max 3, 4, reasonably, you could, say that's obviously there are exceptions to the rule, but 3 World Cups is a lot to play in when you look at that stretch over 12 years. And depending on timing, when guys age in or out, every 2 years, again, I think you open up that door of saying, I'm going to sit at home for a couple of days instead of going and playing in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been a lot cooler if this summer was spent with the A team and we were seeing peak United States men's national team. And I think the handling of the Pulisic absence definitely could have been handled better from a PR perspective. But it was a double-edged sword because I totally understand. I'd rather have Christian Pulisic fully fit and firing at the World Cup next year than winning or potentially, improving the performances of the American team in the Gold Cup. But like I said earlier, like if they won that and Pulisic had like some amazing performance, would that even be remembered next year?
And that's exactly what I was going to say. You mentioned it just a couple of iterations ago, winning the Gold Cup, but then not qualifying for the World Cup doesn't do a whole lot for the casual fan. And we need to remember those are the people that we're trying to bring along here and drum up that more interest in the game here in the States. I think the way that you do that is highlighting your biggest players in those biggest moments. And when you water down a competition like the Gold Cup, having it so often, again, it causes confusion. If anybody was watching, they're wondering where Pulisic is. He's probably the one player that those true casual fans are familiar with, or at least have heard of. And so when he's not around, again, it lacks that legitimacy. They say, well, how important can this be if the biggest players aren't here?
Yeah, that's a great point. How important can the tournament be? And I've also seen some like the Dan Libetard show. It's stuff that like lightly dips their toe into the soccer waters, like blasting Pulisic for like abandoning his country for this tournament. And I guess like on paper you could say that, but that's not really an affair.
I can understand that. I can understand that. But then, there's always the other end of the coin, right? And you got to think like, again, there are plenty of games on his schedule and he needs to get ready for his club because the last thing you want to do is play throughout the summer, come back, and you're not really ready, fit and firing. You're kind of worn down already to start off your club season. Then he gets hurt. Then he's out of the World Cup next year. It's just, it can be a lot.
We shall see. So head of CONCACAF, listen to our pleas for Gold Cup reform now.